Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to give you an idea about what we've been building in Japan over the past 13 months. As Miki discussed, Rakuten ecosystem is about innovation, from cancer to ecosystem, and entering a very unique space about mobile is something very, very thrilling. Before I give you an idea about what we have done in Japan in a very, very short time, I want you to ponder about an idea. With all the connectivity that we have done, with all the great things, all the smartphones that you have today, why do we still have 3 billion people in this world that don't have connectivity? That is really a problem statement that we want to solve. A problem statement that I think has an inherent issue with how networks are built today, how they are architected, how they are deployed. And to be frank with you, my journey to Rakuten, and the reason that I arrived to Rakuten, is this is the first time that I have seen an internet company entering connectivity. And I thought that's a unique opportunity because that is the type of thinking that is needed to completely change the landscape of how telecom networks are built. So unfortunately, I live and dream networks. I talk about it every day because I think we could do better than what currently has happened today. And as exciting as you hear about 5G, I'll be very honest with you, the way that current 5G networks are deployed, our view is a lot different, and that's what I want to walk you through today. So if I walk you through the lenses of my eye and my engineering teams, and you wonder how telecom networks are built today, believe me, it's a complex mess. It's a very, very complex mess. This is what happens today. Every time you go from generation to generation, for some of you that remember, GSM to 3G to 4G, now we're talking about 5G, it is what I call forklift, big hardwares. Many data centers that every time that you go from one generation to the other, the process takes enormous time to upgrade. And I think this is something that when we looked at, and when we started talking about entering MNO, mobile network operation, we thought that this is definitely not something that we want to do. We did not think that we could differentiate and deliver better customer experience. So, in fact, in June of 2018, we presented this idea. And the idea, by the way, did not exist. It isn't something that you could go to the marketplace and say, please sell me this. An idea to build an end-to-end cloud-native networks. What does that really mean? Network must be fully virtualized. Rakuten as a group has already virtualized all the workloads, all the applications, so why not network? Network must be fully automated. Network must be intelligent. We cannot be just another pie provider. The network must have software centricity and software personality. And that's something that we told the world that we're going to do. And to be honest with you, we have been met in the early days with many skepticism, saying, you guys are crazy, how could you do this? You're a smaller team. But in Rakuten way, I think we like these challenges. We like the underdog stories. So we told the world, this is the picture that we want to build. This is today a very simplified view of Rakuten's software network, starting from the most complex things to do on networks, which is these base stations, these antennas, these cell sites. I'm sure most of you, as you travel around in San Francisco and other areas you come from, you notice many of these things deployed on top of buildings, monopoles, towers. We wanted to do something this industry have never done before, which is to virtualize this radio access. And some of the panelists here is going to discuss these ideas and innovation that we have done. Edge data center, as Miki talked about. Believe me today, as excited as you might be about 5G, without edge, 5G will never live to its promise. That is going to differentiate companies that will win in the 5G era and companies that are still in the process of evolution. So if you look at the journey and how we could do this, June, we started actually the network construction. And in fact, if you came to Japan, and as Miki talked about, when you talk about the culture of what we've done, I moved to Japan, and it's been really a thrilling experience for me personally. We had nothing. We had no data center. We had no IP backbone. We had literally no infrastructure. But what I know we had an amazing culture. We had an amazing people. We have an amazing organization that is highly driven to do right for society. So in little time, this is what we finished. This is typically, I've done this so many times in my life. It takes 5 to 6 years to build networks end to end. From radio to net to core to IP to transport to data centers. We've done this, if you really look at it in totality. The reality is, actual hard work started from August, and October 1st, we launched. It's a very, very short duration to finish end-to-end network. And the only way to do this is to drive software centricity into the architecture. I think today, when the panelists come, I won't go into detail into this with you now, but I will tell you, this is probably the most disruptive thing that we have done today. And this is the area that we've been told many, many, many times, this cannot be done. This idea of virtualization of this radio infrastructure is the challenge. This is, by the way, where billions of US dollars have been done. But we solved some very, very complex technical issues. We solved it by partnership. Back to, again, what Mickey talked to you about, is walking together, finding the right partners, whether it is Intel, whether it is Cisco, and working and collaborating on doing something that everybody says it cannot be done. So we have commercialized the world's largest Open RAN architecture in Japan today. The other parts that are really interesting, the simplification of the deployment. Can we make it simpler, easier to deploy? So we went into massive simplification of the infrastructure. And this is a picture I want to share with you of the entire deployment into Rakuten 5G, 4G ready infrastructure. We have taken a process that takes months to do, and we drove it to hours. This is a massively innovative architecture. The entire architecture of Rakuten base stations, or the radio transmitters, look exactly like this. We've also fostered innovations on radio access. And all the hardware, we control supply chain, we control ecosystem, we control security architecture for these platforms. We know every single component, where we source these components. And this is also the world's first open radio access architecture. We've talked about our data centers, massive deployment in edge data centers, large data centers completed. We are today the largest virtual network function provider in Japan. And mostly, I cannot emphasize to you this picture. This is, to me, when I I went to Japan, I was really surprised. The concept of what Mickey talked about English in the company. Firstly, I didn't struggle. I would like to learn Japanese, by the way. I really enjoyed the language. But I didn't struggle. It was easy. I also found it very simple to get people to come to Japan. We have over 28 nationalities assembled to build this network. And I didn't have to seek them. They sought us because this is like highly disruptive. They say, man, this is a dream project. This is like Apollo 11. Have never happened. We want to do this. Nobody have given us the opportunity. So I think in the org, we've done something really, really disruptive. And if I tell you about what we have observed, so what? It sounds really cool. So now you guys done software in the cloud for networks, something very unique. But what does that really mean? We have driven massive efficiency on cost, quite a bit of cost that I think this could be easily passed to consumers. Our data center and mobile edge delivers latency that is unheard of even in today's 5G networks. This is just going to give you an idea of how we're going to put applications on the edge and drive better experience for consumers. We have simplified our infrastructure, we have automated our network, and we're driving intelligence in everything we do in the network. So of course, speed is really good. But I'll be honest with you, when you look today at 5G, you know what's the most popular app today on 5G that everybody shows? Speed test. Well, that's not 5G. If we only talk about speed, then that's not necessarily good. How do you deliver content to the user? Does the web page on the mobile load fast? Does the content get delivered fast? That's what latency is good. Today, this is our result for 4G network. We're delivering 5G latency in a 4G architecture. This is also a massive breakthrough. Our macro base stations are exactly like Wi-Fi access points. They're very, very easy to use and operate. So in summary, I think we've discussed about this. We are now in the process of finalizing our global connectivity platform. It's a software-centric platform, taking away years of deploying networks. We have a dream to do this in months, not years. So we have hope for the future. And what I wanted to do today, I invited several of our key partners to give you an idea about their view about what does 5G really mean. What does it mean for retail, consumers? And I think you will be very happy to also hear their insights. So with that being said, let me welcome our panelists to the group. So allow me to just introduce the panelists to you. I had the immense pleasure with working with them for many, many years in Rakuten and outside of Rakuten in my previous life. Caroline Chan, she is the VP and GM for 5G Infrastructure Division in Intel. Ash Dawood is the CEO and president of Altiostar, the company that is helping us build the virtualization on the radio. And Colin Kincaid is a VP and CTO of service provider in Cisco. So thank you very much for taking time, and I welcome you here. You know, what I thought maybe we start with is having each one of you give your perspective about what is this 5G thing. You know, we hear a lot about it, and the whole world is excited about 5G. But maybe we'll start with you, Caroline, and to give a view about what does Intel think about 5G and why the world is excited about 5G, a lot more than maybe the previous generation when you think about LTE or 3G technologies.
Yeah, I mean, for us, 5G is way more than 4G plus 1. That's a lot of people think about. You mentioned speed tests. Everybody thinks 5G is about speeds and feeds. It's way more than that. Actually, Miki-san and you described very eloquently what's happening in this world. There are really three major trends. Number one, cloud computing is moving to the edge. We could see capacity is shifting to the edge. Number two is AI drives everything. AI, the data, the monetization and collection of data really becomes the engine that drives economic forward, not just in this country, but worldwide. So for us, 5G really drives something called a cloudification of the network, which Tarek, you and the Rakuten team has done beautifully. So with these three together, what really happening is that 5G is more than just a consumer technology. 5G becomes a key enabler of digital transformation of everything that we have experienced today. Smart retails, manufacturing, sports, venues, transportation, and becomes the permeation. Do you realize that today, only a single-digit amount of data generated at the edge is being analyzed? So in China, we are involved in a project that they built a network hanging on the pole, a 5G network hanging on the pole, collecting the data coming from the roadside, and to be able to run analytics on the edge with training in the cloud. That, to me, is a key in what 5G can deliver, is for us humans and us, the enterprises, to be able to better analyze and collect the data and to benefit all of us in our everyday lives.
I agree. And Ash, obviously, I'll tell you, I mean, Ash is a legend in this industry, frankly speaking. So you had many, many successful things that you have done in your life before you go and started Altiostar. So Ash, one might argue, you have taken probably the most complex thing to address, which is this radio access. Can you just maybe walk everybody and explain a little bit about the journey that you guys have taken and how does that is relevant for today and tomorrow's technology?
I mean, it's been an incredible journey. I mean, if you look at the way the networks are built today, and I think this is something that Miki mentioned and also Tarek mentioned, that today the networks are built in what I call custom software running on custom hardware, which is essentially the way networks were built using like mainframe architecture. So the rate at which a customer can launch new services the way they introduced new technology was all driven by a handful of suppliers. Now, what we have done is really broken that model completely apart, where we are focused on a software-centric network that runs on commercial off-the-shelf hardware. It's completely open architecture that would significantly increase the service velocity. Now, to get there, just as Tarek mentioned and Mikitani-san mentioned, that whatever Rakuten embarked on, it was considered to be impossible to do. So when we started on this journey, it was considered to virtualize the RAN was mission impossible. It was dominated by a few suppliers, and there is no way you can enter the market. Now, having built the technology, obviously we needed a partner like Rakuten who was willing to take the risk, where today virtualized RAN has become a reality. Because to succeed in 5G, besides what everything that Caroline said, and what you as a consumer or a business user would need is responsiveness. An individual data is valuable only if you can respond to it very quickly. And that latency, the response time it takes, the longer you wait, the less useful the data is. And that's what we have accomplished in this network in partnership with Rakuten.
Thank you, Ash. And Colin, I think maybe to give all of you context, I remember June last year, we went to Cisco office in San Jose, and we started drawing things on paper that doesn't necessarily exist in the industry. And as you guys see how this journey between us have matured, how do you think the networks that we have built today is applicable to driving improvements towards 5G adoption in society, and whether it is consumer or enterprise? How do you think Cisco point of view to the innovation that we have delivered together?
So I think it's taking all of these things that people are talking about. We talk about moving into software, you say about cloud, but if you look at what Rakuten and we have done together, is you've built a telco cloud, which is pervasive throughout the area. So it's not just a cloud in one large data center. It's a highly distributed data center across all of Japan. And that gives you the ability not only to take software from companies like Altiostar and deploy it in a very different way at a much better cost structure, but it also allows you to start looking at how you use that cloud for other things, whether those are consumer services. We heard Fortnite being mentioned, or the gaming services, but moving new types of services out closer to the customers, as well as providing a platform on which new business services can be used and generated, because you actually have, it's not just a network, it's a large distributed telco cloud, which gives you a whole new way of approaching your customers and a whole new platform and ecosystem for yourselves as well as for your end customers. I think that's the biggest change from a network perspective. But the implication of that is that there's now a huge platform that has unexplored opportunities on it. Think about when cloud was initially introduced, there was businesses that we wouldn't even imagine. So it's really the types of things that we can now start to put together are incredible. And you look at 5G as well, it introduces interesting concepts like unlicensed radio, meaning that companies can use 5G technology without having to buy spectrum. And that creates a whole different set of opportunities in the industrial space and in the commerce space. So I think from a societal perspective, it's really a new way of really creating new businesses. It's a whole new platform. And you look at what a company like Rakuten has done, has built that telco cloud to really enable that, which that 5G was the reason for building it, or the mobile network, but that's just the beginning of what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. So Caroline, yesterday when we were in Los Angeles, I think the one interesting thing you and I have talked about, why nobody else have done this? And I would love maybe for you to give your views to the audience about why Rakuten is different and unique in the approach of how we're building the network.
Well, you gave me a tough task. So I've been in the wireless industry for a long time. And what Tarek referred to is yesterday we had an opportunity to present to a group of operators, all the strategy officers and the technology officers, what we have done together with all of y'all. I think the reason is that when we started the journey way back, we're talking about first G, 2G, 3G, the mindset of everybody is that we got to get the best, squeeze the most juice out of the spectrum. Spectrum has always been very, very precious. So the natural tendency is to build something that's very specific, like as you mentioned, right, very targeted to that operation. And then gradually you start building an entire workforce with that mindset. It's really, I think what you have done is two things. One is a technology breakthrough with everybody walking this journey together. The second thing is a mindset shift. To believe, I think what I really commend is that the team is that the courage of conviction. We're convinced that this is the way to do the business. This is the way to build 5G. This is the way 5G will change the business, not just consumer and business. With that conviction, we ask ourselves, how can this be done? Versus, I think a lot of people in that room, when we talk to them, is that, how is this possible? Show me this can be done. Versus we said, this will be done, therefore we'll make it happen. The mindset change, I think, is probably one of the obstacles that we need to together overcome.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just reiterate the point. It's the idea of like walking together. It's working and collaborating and co-developing. Ash, we've talked enough, I think, about the importance of edge. I think maybe it's important to also hear the relationship between edge and radio, and maybe explain to the audience a little bit about the virtualization of the radio and why it's important to deliver content and applications to consumer and enterprises very different than what traditional networks do today.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to 5G type of application, it's not just a matter of speed. It's a matter of large number of devices will be connected to the 5G network, and the network will have to adapt to what the user is doing. The same user, depending on what the user is doing, is it a gaming application, is it health monitoring, or is it downloading files? So depending on what the user is doing, the network has to adapt. And it has to adapt dynamically. In the technical term, it is what is called network slicing. So you take the same pipe and make it behave differently depending on who the user is and what the user is doing. Now, you cannot make it happen on custom software with custom hardware unless you get to virtualization. Virtualization allows you to create these custom slices on the fly. Depending on what the user pattern is in a particular area, who the user is, what the user is doing, you can dynamically create these slices to service that user. Now, that architecture can only be done by virtualization and deploying the virtualization at the edge, which is the closest point that it connects to the radio. And by making the radio simple, non-intelligent, and putting all the intelligence in the edge, you are getting far greater control on the behavior of the radio. Actually, you end up improving the spectral efficiency that Caroline mentioned. So you accomplish multiple objectives. One is adapting to the network to what the user is doing, at the same time simplifying your network, reducing the OpEx, and getting greater control is how your network can adapt to what the user is doing. Now, the other big benefit is by virtualizing it, simplifying it, using commercial off-the-shelf hardware, you also significantly lower the OpEx. And you increase your service velocity. You are able to add services at the edge very quickly. It's like you go to your cell phone today, you like an app, you go to an app store, download the application. You start using it. The idea is how do you build a network that the businesses and consumers are able to select what they want from the network, what kind of a behavior they want, and then obviously they're willing to pay for that. And that can only be done by virtualizing it and putting that intelligence as close to the radio as possible. And that's what we have accomplished in the Rakuten network.
So there is another interesting topic, which is, I call it lots of debates. And Colin and I always debate about this. The competition or not or collaboration between 5G and Wi-Fi technology.
Oh.
So this is an interesting one because there is one philosophy of thinking to say that 5G might replace Wi-Fi or 5G might complement Wi-Fi. So Colin, it'll be helpful to hear your feedback about how does Cisco see the collaboration between 5G and new architecture and Wi-Fi that's going to come on the market this year?
Sure. This is, I think everyone has an opinion on this one, but I think, I think you're specifically referring to sort of the evolution of Wi-Fi 6.
Correct.
So Wi-Fi 6 is now in the process of starting to come out, and Wi-Fi 6 is really looking at bringing in a lot of those types of things in terms of a higher density, longer reach, more sort of direct channelization, all of these things that are really in the mobile network already and evolving rapidly with 5G. I think that they're really going to long-term have to be complementary technologies, because you look at Wi-Fi has a very heavy private ownership within corporations and in people's homes. Mobile is really heavily provided today by the operators, and there's not going to be just one clear winner, because one is there's a long period of time where both private and sort of operators will have to be making choices on how they want to do the ownership and how they want to evolve. So they have to work hand in hand, and they have to be looking at these things together. And I think if you even look at some of what Rakuten has been doing with some of their devices deploying, combination of LTE plus Wi-Fi is critical to your strategy, because very much acknowledging that they're both have strengths, but it really is going to get down to ownership and operation of it, I think, more than it is about a technology argument.
Agreed. I want to also talk about something very important I mentioned earlier, and it's really, really critical because it talks about the philosophy of why we think this is disruptive and what's the implications, impact of what we've done to consumers in terms of cost benefit. Maybe a little bit about automation. So I wish I could explain to you clearly, when we talk a virtual machine of radio access, for example, is a very novel idea. We see it in Rakuten. Nobody else have done it before. So maybe, Ash, I want to just spend a little bit of time about the work and journey that we're doing into automation. And what does it really mean in terms of service agility? Because I'll give you one thing that for sure, maybe some of you are not aware of it. To put one software release in telecom, it takes 1 year. 1 year. To put one software release today, by the minute it finishes through its test, validation, integration, while if you look at company even like Rakuten, Netflix, they do thousands of software updates every single day. So we wanted to change this analogy when we started this. We're going to say, for us, we're building the telco cloud, but we're building it on web-scale architecture to allow service innovation and agility. So in automation, what do you think, your view, about how we have taken this journey of automation? And certainly we're not done yet, but it'll be very, very interesting to let everybody hear your understanding and views.
Yeah, it's been a pretty incredible journey. Obviously, having Rakuten drive it, and I don't know how many people know Tarek personally, but he definitely is a very aggressive driver, which is a good thing, because it really gets all of the team members to come together. To make this happen, we had to work with a variety of companies. We had to work with Intel, Cisco, a company called Innovi, which is doing the OSS, NEC. So all the players had to come together, and we had to chart out our objective is to be able to deploy a single radio in 20 minutes. Our goal is that if we want to distribute a new software load throughout the whole network, it should all happen within one maintenance window overnight. The goal is that if we want to upgrade the network, we should completely automate the upgrade process. And incredibly, it required all the players to work together. And I can tell you today that the journey is not ended. It's an ongoing journey, but we have accomplished many, many of the big objectives. So today, we effectively can bring in the radio network within 20 to 30 minutes after the radios are installed. Today, we can take a significant number of radio sites and upgrade them simultaneously. Ultimate goal is to be able to do thousands of these sites all concurrently. Clearly requires significant amount of software development by a variety of players. And I believe that we are almost very close to achieving our objective. I'm very confident that within the next few months, we will get to a scale where all of the Rakuten network will be able to upgrade so that we can launch new services very rapidly. And it will all be done zero touch, no human intervention, and fully automated.
Yeah, just one correction. Ash mentioned maintenance window. We don't want maintenance window.
Right.
So we want to go into like continuous development,
continuous.
continuous innovation. So I want to switch a little bit to content and applications, Caroline. So I know Intel has been driving discovery of new application possibility that 5G might bring, and especially if you tie that to the edge. So when you talk about sports, for example, and content delivery architecture, the new CDNs of the future, the new delivery of TV, can you give me your view about how do you see this ecosystem of application, and maybe focus a little bit about maybe the sports? What are you guys doing on the sports side to validate the use cases of future technology that 5G will bring?
Yeah, so the journey to 5G, it requires a lot of trials and errors. And so actually, we've been doing a lot of proof of concept in conjunction with a lot of partners here. We really looked at 5G as a way of providing, number one, getting the data and really start, like for consumer, personalize the data. And I was just going to share with you that one thing we've done in CES this year is National Hockey League is putting sensors in all of their skates and clothing of athletes, getting 4,000 data points per second, way more than they used to do. How do you get that data in and immediately analyze and providing that to the coaching staff and changing how you monitor the player's performance, health? Concussion is always a risk. In the future, maybe taking that into a way of monetizing that data in terms of sports gaming, sports betting, which is now legal in the US. And one thing that I will point out that actually in your soft launch, we did that. In Tokyo, there was an NBA game going on. And I don't know if you guys are, when I watch my favorite football team, the Texas Longhorns, I turn down the volume of the announcer because I don't like how they talk about my team. What you guys did was you took in 6 streams from the live game, 10 streams from the court side. So now you have a choice of watching this particular, there was a Houston Rockets, your favorite Houston Rockets players from particular angle, and you can listen to any announcer that you want. You might want to listen to an announcer who don't really know much about NBA. The kind of personalized delivery of content that customized to you, your taste, I think is one of the major things that will change the consumer behavior that enabled by 5G and edge.
Perfect. I agree. And then, Colin, the discussion between is 5G built for everything? Is 5G good only for consumer? But we haven't talked about the enterprise. Right. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in enterprise and industry and future industries to leverage this technology. What is Cisco's view about the future enterprise? So
we really see, I think, taking a couple of these things, like Ash made reference to things like slicing, which is really the ability to create private networks. That's a huge opportunity for how enterprises can look at and use 5G networks, how they can start to combine what is their network, their business network, with the provider network and start unifying how subscribers are. Today, once you leave the physical premise, you have all sorts of things about security and how you get in. Really being able to have on-net and off-net services unified is the great opportunity. And 5G, we've talked a lot about sort of some of the end things, but if you look at the actual specifications for 5G, there's a lot more APIs for control, which start to give you the ability to combine the network from the enterprise and the service provider in a way that really gives new opportunities for those enterprises to have their customers have a unified experience, unified security across both public and private. So it's a tremendous sort of opportunity there. And I think, we look at the big change in manufacturing and the fact that with things like private 5G, you can start to have these opportunities to do a lot more things with manufacturing where, there's a lot of just-in-time manufacturing now for, whether it's Nike shoes or automobiles, it's going to be massively transformed. If you look at in Germany, they've actually set aside spectrum just for auto manufacturing to really invigorate the 5G plus manufacturing in Germany for the auto companies. So it's going to really transform an awful lot, both in the industries and manufacturing, but also how the CIO of an enterprise thinks about on-net and off-net services coming together in a single unified way.
Right. And for my last topic with the panelists, it's an important one, and I don't want to underestimate its criticality. Most of you, of course, have multiple devices. Should we not be concerned about security? So think about this context today. I think we're not oblivious to the fact that there's a lot of discussions that are happening between US and other countries about 5G. We took security as an ingrained part of the DNA of how we're building Rakuten, 4G and 5G. We think it's a national responsibility. It's important to protect the assets. And security is a very complex topic, right? It includes supply chain, it includes hardening the software, it includes understanding where the components and the manufacturing come in. So Ash, I want to get your view about the criticality of cybersecurity as you build this new generation software architecture telecom network.
I think security in 5G is going to be super critical. Just because of 5G is going to touch everything everywhere, not only for the consumer, for also the businesses that Colin mentioned. So it is very critical that every component, as Tariq mentioned, from day one, is built to be extremely secure. And the best way to build a secure network is to build an open network. By having an open network, there is a complete visibility between all of the components of the network. Not only the hardware components, but all of the software components. And between all the software components, there is total encryption. So that's a highly secure network that we are building at Rakuten. So every component that touches the Rakuten network has secured encryption built in. Every component of software that gets introduced in the Rakuten network has to meet a certain security level. And all the software interfaces are completely visible to Rakuten. So they can fully monitor what is the behavior of the network, how the traffic is flowing through the network. And that is very critical, because this is a complete open box. It's not a closed system where the operator has no idea what's going on inside this closed system. So security from endpoint security, security throughout all of the components of the network, security about everything that touches the network is extremely critical, and it has to be designed in from day one. Security is not something you can bolt on. If you don't have it from day one, it will be very difficult to introduce it. And it can only be done with a completely open architecture.
Absolutely, Ash. And just in summary, maybe I'll just summarize kind of the talking points of what we've been talking today. We're excited. We're very, very excited about what we have built, because we think, of course, in Japan, this will have a huge transformational value to society. We think to the world, it's a phenomenal opportunity. Back to the picture that I drew earlier on, and I showed you that 3 billion people don't have connectivity. Now I'm going to tell you the answer why. It's cost and it's complexity. We think Rakuten, together with our partners, we could solve and sort these issues, but we only could do it together. Building a cloud-native network is first in its world. It's very encouraging to see the possibilities. So thank you for attending the session. Please join me in giving a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you.